Hi, Shalom. Peace and blessings be with all of you. This is Lee Wiseman, and I'm Lale Tunser, and we're here from Universal God Message of Peace. And today, the topic we'll be talking about is holding on to the rope of God. So, there's a verse in the Qur'an from chapter 3, 103, about how encouraging people to hold on together to the rope of God and to not be divided. And it says that we were in the brink of hellfire and he saved us. So life can be very challenging for everybody, full of struggles, hardship, times of unexpected occurrences. We just don't know what tomorrow will bring. Anything can happen. What do we do when we feel really, really broken? It feels like the whole world is against us, tearing us into pieces. Where do we go? What do we look for? What do we hold on to? What is the rope of God? This is what we will be talking about today. So over to Lee Wiseman. I'd love to hear your understanding from a Jewish perspective on what the rope of God is.
So when I first, I read this verse. I want to read the verse because I think the verse is really beautiful, and I want to share just one story about it. So the verse goes like this: "O ye who believe, fear Allah as he should be feared. Let not death overtake you when you are let not death overtake you except when you're in a state of submission. Hold fast all together by the rope of Allah and be not divided. And remember the favor of Allah which He bestowed upon you when you were enemies, and He united your hearts in love, so that by His grace you became His brothers, and you were on the brink of a pit of fire, and He saved you from it. Thus does Allah explain to you His commandments that you may be guided. And let there be among you a body of men who would invite to goodness and enjoy equity and enjoin equity and forbid evil, and it is they who shall prosper." So there's a lot of pieces to that. But let me share a story, and then I'll go to the pieces. So there's a story that there was once Rabbi Nachman of Breslov was in the city of Tiberia. He's in the city of Tiberias, and there was a terrible plague in the city, and he had to escape the city very quickly. And the only way to escape the city was to jump over a wall into the Kinneret, into the Sea of Galilee. And he jumps and he jumps over the wall, and he realizes that it's too long a fall. And so he grabs onto a tree that's sticking out of the wall, and he's hanging there by this tree.
Mhm.
And in that moment, he has this incredible spiritual experience, and he thinks, this is really what my whole life is like, right?
Nice.
My whole life is like just holding on.
Mhm.
Sometimes, right, when you're running from the plague, right,
Mhm.
best you can do is just hold on to a tree, not knowing how long it's going to hold, right? Because that's all you can do. Sometimes all you can do is hold on to what little bit that you have that you have available to you.
Mhm.
And so I think to some extent the rope of God uh, varies for us, you know. It's not the same for any two people at any time,
Mhm.
but that it's always there. That
Mhm.
there's always something that we can hold on to. There's always some form of hope. Um, and it's interesting, the Torah refers to it as a chut shel chesed, as a thread of kindness.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's only a thread. Maybe it doesn't even feel like a rope, right?
Mhm.
It just feels like a little thread. But that little thread, if we can manage to hold on to it, and the verse is beautiful because it says to hold on to it together
Mhm.
and to remember the fact that you could have been enemies before,
Mhm.
but you become friends.
Mhm.
That maybe before you were at the pit of hell, right? And now you're on the right way. Things may have been much, much worse for you, right?
Mhm.
Things may have been much, much worse for you. But if you're able to, but if you're able to hold on, and really, I think that it's important to hold on together. I think it's not something that we can do alone. You know, we were not created to be alone.
Mhm.
Um,
That's very beautiful how you described it. And the fact that you mentioned a tree in your story, it was like I knew that was coming because I did mention to you one of my daughters, Miriam, she's 9, she's very spiritual. And when I before these discussions, I sometimes ask my children, so what do you think the answer is to this question?
mhm.
How would you answer it? And I did that again today. We were in the car driving, and I said, "Oh, we're going to be talking about the rope of God." I read to them the verse from the Qur'an, and I said, "So, what do you understand as the rope of God, girls? Take turns. What do you say?" So they all took turns and said something, and Miriam, she came out with, she said, "Trees, mummy, trees," and I was like, "Trees? Why do you say trees? Where did that come from?" And she said, "Because trees make us breathe." She said, "Without trees, we cannot breathe." She said, "You just have to keep breathing." And isn't that amazing? I was like, wow. I was like, that's so cool. And I was like, yeah, actually that's that's really wise thing to say, Miriam. And I thanked her. And then I moved on, and Amelie said, Amelie said 2 things, mummy. She said, one, um, we have to do this together. Like as what you said we can't do it
They,
alone.
they they basically covered all my ground.
Exactly what you said. So
Yeah.
she said we have to do this together. And then she came out with something else. She said diversity is good. And that seems like it was very irrelevant to the topic, really.
Mhm.
But it was really interesting that she said, oh, yeah, diversity is good. We have to do this together. And she said, when we help each other, God is helping us through each other. This is what she said.
Mhm.
So that rope of God is actually us. It's like, well, from her understanding, and actually I would agree, that rope is us when we reach out our hand to help our fellow human. And when we choose to have mercy on somebody,
Mhm.
then we're having mercy, like we ourselves are being brought out from the hellfire together. Does that make sense? Like we help each
Right.
other. Actually, being diverse is a good thing because we all have different ways of helping each other. And to make a rope, I guess you have to have lots of little strings, or like
Mhm. Mhm.
the more strings you have in the rope, the stronger it
The
is.
stronger it is.
Just
Yeah.
one piece of string alone is not very strong. Whereas if we all tie together and we hold on to each other and we help each other, then that itself brings us out of the brink of hell, really. And I think we can apply that to our lives every day. And then my third daughter, I said, so I said, okay, what about you, Heidi? And she didn't answer. She said, no, I don't know, mummy. She said, I agree with what they say, but I'm not going to answer. So I was like,
Okay.
okay. So,
Also a good answer.
but even in that, yeah, even in that, I think there's a lot of meaning because, as you said, all those points that you've covered, it can mean something different to every different person, and 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 we have if we use our mind to think about what could be the rope of God. Obviously, in this verse, it's about not being divided. So it's got to be something that we all agree with, or that is part of that nobody can argue with. Because what causes division? What causes division is when we argue, when we have different opinions. So if one person says, this is the rope of God, and the other person says, this is the rope of God, then obviously
Right.
they argue and they won't be holding on to the same
And one
rope.
guy's pulling on this side, and one's pulling on
Exactly.
that side, and you're
Exactly.
pulling
So it's got
against
to
each
be,
other.
yeah, so it's got to be a rope that is that unites all humanity. And I think even if, I think the rope of God might be the Quran for the Muslims, and it might be the commandments of God and the Torah for the Jews, and it might be, the light that was sent through the gospel and the parables through Jesus, peace be upon him. and it for to the Christians. So, but what is the rope? What is the rope that holds all these different sects and groups
Well,
together?
it's
That's, I guess,
interesting.
the rope of humanity, isn't it?
You know, you know, the last verse is so interesting in its simplicity, right? It says, "Let there be among you a body of people who should invite to goodness, right,
Yes,
and
yes.
enjoin equity, right,
Actually, yeah,
fairness,
yeah,
justice,
yeah.
right, and forbid evil."
Excellent,
And
excellent.
really, that's so
That's it.
simple, right?
Yeah,
It's really so simple, and it's not, you know, it's so simple. And I'll use the word ecumenical. I think that's a fair word for it, right? It's very simple, to try to invite people to do good, to try to invite people to be to encourage people to be just and to be fair,
yeah.
right? And to try to forbid evil. And and honestly, on those things, like there's not a lot of disagreement. I
There
mean,
is,
we
and we,
disagree about prayer, we disagree about when you should fast, when you shouldn't fast, you
yeah,
know, but we don't disagree on what constitutes good. We don't disagree what constitutes justice. We don't disagree on what constitutes evil,
mhm,
right? For the most part, right? For the most part, we may disagree when it comes to our personal interests or to our communal interests. We may
yeah,
have disagreements about that, but in essence, we don't disagree about that. So,
yeah.
so I think the rope is also kind of like holding on to the basics of morality, to hold on to like the very basics and to hold on together. And I love where it says that you were enemies and now you're not, right? The idea, the hope, right? Never to lose the hope that people who are enemies can still can stop being enemies, that that's not an eternal situation. That's not existential. That's not built into the world. The world is not built into the world. The world's not built in such a way that we should be enemies with one another. But really, the people who are enemies can eventually become people who are pulling on the same rope, getting on the same side. And
I agree with you. I see it as the rope of mercy, really, because you throw out a rope to help somebody because you have mercy and you love them, and it has to be, it's driven by love, and love is the only thing that can get rid of our hatred. And there's always choices that we make. So when we feel sometimes like everybody's against us, everything is against us, we're surrounded at all sides, everyone's attacking you, whatever, in your mind you can choose to bless them or curse them. You can choose to have mercy or revenge. You can choose to um you get to a point where you have a choice, and it's in that choice that they can't break you. Like, nobody, if you make the right choice in that moment, that's the place where nobody can break you. And I mean that as a single person or as a whole,
mhm.
all of humanity. Like, if I'm talking, if let's say, if we're talking about humanity as one soul, and shaitan, or or our inside and the battle within, and you feel like your righteousness, your goodness, your purity, your holiness is being attacked. We can choose to either see that attack as an opportunity to get even closer to God, or we can see that opportunity, that attack, that situation, that event, as a threat, and then do the wrong thing because you think that you know best. You think that you know better than God. And I think it comes to that. Do we choose to follow our own understanding of how we should deal with that situation, or should we go with the commandments of God? God's mercy and God's rope, is my understanding, is his commandments. And actually, this
Mhm.
verse before it talks about that says about the commandments of God, and like to obey
Right.
his commandments. And so actually it's like, my understanding is it is the guidance of God, because we don't always know. Obviously, it's all inside of us, it's all in our hearts, in the ideal world, everybody knows what's right, everybody knows what's wrong in every situation, in every given moment. But sometimes we forget. And it's in those moments that God throws out a rope to us. It's like it is the Quran, it's the Torah, it's the light that's come with the prophets and messengers as a guidance to mankind to help us find the right path again, for those who are lost. And
A
in
rope can also be can also be guidance, you know.
yeah,
And
guidance.
yeah, because if you think about, if you've ever this, I don't recommend this experience, but I got to have it. Uh,
Yes, you go on a path and you have a rope and you find your way back through the
Right. I mean, there's, this is if you're in the dark, if you're in the dark, I did this in the Andes. It's a horrible experience, but you're in the dark, and the only thing that keeps you from falling off the ridge, right, is the fact that there's a rope there, right? And you're kind of holding onto the rope, and that as long as you're holding onto the rope, you're not going to slide off the side of a mountain, right? And that's your guide. And sometimes that's what the rope is. Sometimes the rope is, what keeps you is what allows you to move forward,
yeah.
move forward safely.
And
And certainly the commandments of God are like that.
and also like the analogy that came to my mind was like the rope of a candle, the little rope that
The
burns.
wick. Mhm.
The wick, sorry, the wick. That's like a little rope, isn't it?
Mhm.
So without that, how would the
No
candle
fire. That's-
well, how would the candle burn without the wick?
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Oh, and
Um,
actually, you need a candle in the darkness. So when we're in the darkness of this world, we need to find that candle within, and that candle, you need that wick. So you need the rope of God to like light that fire within to help guide you in the dark, I guess. And yeah, sorry, I'm going a bit.
getting
We could think
drifting.
of yeah, drifting, just
No,
getting.
but I think that the image of the rope. I think you said before that that it's braided together. It's about as good a description of what community can do for you, and what community can do for us, and for bettering our life as anything else, right? That to be able to take that. It's not just community, not just people, but also the qualities of people. When you create a community, you're not just you're not just taking people, but you're also taking all of their talents and all of their qualities and all of their strengths and even their weaknesses, and you're kind of braiding them together, right? And what you create in the end is something which is much stronger than all the individual pieces together. Right? When you have somebody, if you have a group, right? And you have one person who's got a lot of anger, right? You have one person who's got a lot of anger. They're just like angry at the world, right? They just have a lot of like that energy. And you have another person who's very serene, right? And calm and kind, right? Now, those two people put separately are a disaster, right? They could really be a disaster, right? But if you kind of put them together, right, then they work out together, because you have one person who's giving the energy, right? Then you have the other person who's giving the serenity and tranquility, and that works well, right? That rope now works really well. And if you start including all the other qualities that people have, you have the happy people, you have the melancholic people, and you put them all together, what you end up is with a very strong rope, because you have all these wonderful tensions inside of it. And that's something you can really hold on to. And that's something where that's a great conduit for God's love. That's a great conduit for God's kindness. So part of it is we make maybe in some sense we make the rope, right? But the kindness comes from God, right? It's kind of the conduit, and we hold on to it, right? So we hold on to it, and that allows us to be able to access, that kindness and mercy, that kindness and mercy of God, together.
Together, so beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that's really well said. And I think the danger is when we think that we are better than somebody else because of, you know, um, money or wealth or fame or whatever it is, or spirituality or whatever it is, you think that you're better than somebody else. And then you think that you play more of a role than somebody else does. But actually, that's when we get divided, when people think that they're better than someone else because of a talent or a gift or a blessing that they've been given from God that the other person hasn't, and somehow that blessing is better than someone else. No, we all have blessings, gifts, and talents. We just have to channel them in the right way. So as you said, if somebody's nature is to get angry, more it's easier for them to get angry than someone else. Who are we to judge and say I am better than them because I don't get as angry? Actually,
Right.
wouldn't it be more productive and better to say, well, actually, if that's your nature and that's what you're more inclined to do, we can find a role for you where your anger can actually help us help the situation. Why
Mhm.
can't we channel that anger into something like justice? Or, maybe that person can
Right.
be, like we can channel that anger into getting angry about injustice in the world and oppression in the world and put it to a purpose that helps us. And the same with everything, really. And that's what makes a team work, and that's what makes communities work, is when everybody's
Yeah.
got a role and yeah, and feels important.
I've never done a rope pull, but I feel like, so I, I feel like, um, if you have a bunch of people pulling a rope, I don't know I don't know if this is a thing in the UK, but here in America, it's a common game to have rope pulls, right? You have people like on
Absolutely.
either side of the rope, and they pull, and there's like a big mud puddle in the middle, and they have to pull each other into the mud puddle. Um, and I suspect like that probably the main thing that makes that work well is, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of brute strength, but probably more than the brute strength, you probably have to have organization. That is, you probably have to have people kind of pulling at the same time, right? If you have everybody pulling at the same time, then and pulling appropriately, and you have a good anchor, I think that's important. You have to have like the heaviest person in the back with the anchor on it. Uh, but I think if you do that, then you have a better chance than if you have a bunch of people who are like we use the expression American English hot dogging it. People who are trying to show off and show, "Oh, I'm big, strong, and I'm so amazing and awesome," Or if you have people who are going, well, no, I'm really too cool for this, like I'm an intellectual, I can't be pulling this rope, so I'm gonna just pretend, just stand here. Right. So as long as everybody's doing their job, right, and recognizing that we have different jobs. There's one guy who's the anchor, right, and everybody else is pulling. You don't have to be Mr. Muscle person, but you just have to kind of pull. I think that the rope works much better when people are functioning together. And there's a lot of hope. I mean, I think that verse is really a verse about hope,
Mm.
and and that the rope is always there. There's never that the rope is always there. It's like you imagine you get thrown into the ocean, right?
Mm.
So if you know the people on the boat are your friends and they love you, right? You start looking around for the life preserver, because they're going to throw one out to you, they're going to save you, right? And so that's how we should be, right? So when we feel like when we're drowning in the water, we should be looking for the life preserver because we know it's going to be there, right? Because we know it's going to be there. The rope is going to be there for us to grab.
Is that really? I don't know. Yes, maybe. I think you're right. You're right. It should be there. It should be there in the physical way as well as the spiritual way. But like, sometimes you really feel like it's not there.
Yeah,
And
that
actually, you know, like you
it's
feel like
scary.
you're alone on a boat in the middle of an ocean. The wind comes, your clothes are torn off, you're naked, you're shouting, nobody's
And
there.
there you are.
Your phone disappears, there's no signal, there's a big storm, and you're
Yes.
completely by yourself and you cry out to God. And actually everybody forsakes you, everything forsakes you. And the only one is there is you're there with your creator.
Yeah.
And and he has the power to save you. And actually, like, he's the only one really that can save us. And everything else is a you know, I don't think we should rely on anybody or anything to save us,
Yeah,
except
well, that's a lot
obviously
of times.
he saves us through other people as he wills, obviously, you know. But he's the one worthy of all praise, glory, thanks, um
Yeah. It
and
would be nice if we could always count on other people. Of course, we can't always count on other people. That's, you
actually,
know, uh, but my experience, and this is just me, my experience is that some of my most profound experiences with God have been in my moments of most desperation, where I really felt like there was just nothing else, right? Where I had to be kind of stripped bare of any other hope. You know, all other hope was gone, you know, and there was nobody to help me. And in those moments, you know, that in that desperation, right, I was looking for that chut chesed, I was looking for that little thread of kindness, you know, to come down to me, and it didn't fail. Um, and when it didn't fail, that was pretty amazing, right? Because it's like, wow, okay, everybody else. You remember last week? I don't know if I don't know if you were there. Um, in the Psalms, you know, King David talks about parents, and he said, even if your parents reject you, right? Even if your parents reject you, God won't reject you, right? The people you most count on in the world, right? I mean, at some point, you know, as a baby, you develop, you know, whether you like it or not, you develop this trust in your parents. But you know, they have their problems. Everybody has their things, and they can reject you. It happens all the time, unfortunately. You know, and he says, you know, says even in that case, God won't, and it's a very extreme case that he gives, because to say that, look, even when the world rejects you, even in the people who are supposed to most love you and most take care of you, right? Even when if they reject you, says, I still love you, right? I still love you, and I'm gonna still send my rope, my thread, right?
always
Uh,
there as long as we're breathing. Yeah, the rope of
right.
God.
That's why you
Definitely
have to keep breathing. So you tell your daughter she's right. You have to keep breathing.
amazing though that she said that. And I was
Yeah.
actually, I didn't expect that she would say a tree or
Yeah.
trees. And but people are like trees as well, aren't they? People are like trees. And and let's try and help each other. And um I think perhaps we've come into this world into, you know, and experience moments of hell, like we're at the brink of hell. And when we're divided, that's what makes it worse. When we argue, when we divide, and what makes us argue, I guess our ego and selfishness. And the rope of God is when we choose to be merciful and kind and help each other in any way we can to try and help each other. And then we can all come out of hell. It will be great, and we can like create a new world. It'll be really good, don't
Yeah,
you think?
that's a great promise there, where he says, you know, you were on the, you know, you were what the verse is very nice. You know, you were on the brink of hell, um and I took you out, which is also, listen, I think a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking that we're on the brink of hell. I mean, if you if you look at the news, social media, whatever, it's very easy to think that not only am I on the brink of help, the whole world, everybody's on the brink of help. It's or maybe we're there already. I mean, it really sometimes feels like that, like hell's descended upon earth. But the hope is, it says, well, you're gonna think back, you're gonna think back on that time when you were on the brink of hell, and that you were able to pull yourself, you were able to pull yourself out of that by holding on to the rope of God, that you had guidance, that you had help, and that you were able to do it together. And that's the hope. And so even though, sometimes it feels like we're on the brink of the abyss, that that there's always hope.
There is,
Don't
there
give
is
up
always
hope.
hope. There's always a light inside every single one of us, the light of God. It's always there. We don't always see it, and we feel lost, and we feel hopeless, and we feel, you might feel the whole world is against you. Um, but we have to look for that light inside. And yeah, I think the stars might fade, the sun might disappear, the moon might go. So instead of looking outside of us for that light, let's look inside for the light of God, I think. Yeah. And sometimes it's in the darkest moments that's when we see it, because otherwise you don't really appreciate that. And
Indeed, indeed. So we've now given you hope. I hope everybody takes the hope, and the most important thing, not the most important thing, one of the most important things is to like and subscribe down there. Okay, I'm sure it's down there somewhere, to like and subscribe, and to join us again next week. And promise that we'll bring you more messages of hope, and more ways for you to become closer to your God and closer to each other.
Amen. God bless you all. Thank you. Shalom. Thank
Shalom.